Today we're going to break down the exact psychological mechanics of manipulation. But actually, more importantly, we're going to reveal the internal habits of those rare people who are just completely impossible to control. If you've ever found yourself wondering why some folks keep falling for emotional traps while others just effortlessly sidestep them, well, you're in exactly the right place. Let's dive in.
Think about the typical target for manipulation for a second. Who pops into your head? You probably picture someone, kind of weak, highly submissive, or maybe just lacking confidence, right? But the reality is actually completely different. As it turns out, the easiest person to control is rarely the weakest person in the room.
So, who is it? Well, it's usually the person who desperately wants to be understood. Look, manipulation almost never starts with brute force or obvious threats. It actually starts with this incredibly powerful, almost intoxicating feeling that someone finally truly gets you. And that right there is exactly why so many brilliant, highly capable people wake up one day wondering how on earth they missed every single warning sign. Our deep craving for connection, it can totally blindfold our intellect. All right, let's jump right into part 1, the illusion of connection. We're going to look at the external weapons manipulators use to literally manufacture a totally false sense of intimacy.
Okay, enter strategic mirroring. Imagine meeting someone who just instantly agrees with every single thing you say. They're laughing at your jokes a split second before they're even funny, even the really bad ones, and they unquestioningly admire your opinions. Naturally, we trust people who feel familiar to us, right? We mistake this intense mirroring for amazing natural chemistry. But psychology identifies this as a highly calculated tactic. The manipulator is literally just borrowing your personality so they can become your safe place.
And this creates a super dangerous dynamic. Most of us just rush to trust. We fall headfirst into that emotional trap of instant familiarity. But people with true emotional immunity, they do something totally different. They still enjoy the connection. They aren't robots after all, but they deliberately hit pause before handing over their trust. They are actively looking for patterns early on. Just that tiny little fraction of hesitation acts as a massive shield that protects them from countless emotional traps.
Moving on to part 2, the approval and urgency traps. Once that trust is established, manipulators start constantly shifting the environment to keep you totally off balance.
Because here's the thing, unpredictable rewards create incredibly powerful emotional habits. It's exactly like a slot machine at a casino. The utter uncertainty of the payout is what keeps people pulling that lever over and over. Manipulators use this exact same behavioral psychology. They might shower you with public praise, making you feel like $1,000,000, and then suddenly withdraw it over some tiny, insignificant mistake. In a flash, that approval stops being a gift and literally becomes a leash. Unmanipulable people, they appreciate the praise, sure, but they never become dependent on it, which completely and quietly disarms the controller's absolute greatest weapon.
Then there's the whole manufactured urgency thing. Someone is suddenly pressuring you to make an immediate decision, aggressively acting like if you wait even 5 minutes, you'll lose everything. Whenever this happens, you really have to stop and ask yourself, wait, why this sudden rush? Here is the biological reality. When under pressure, your brain relies on raw emotion, not reasoning. If your heart is racing and your adrenaline spikes, your brain's logic center basically just shuts down. It's out of office. That creates the absolute perfect breeding ground for manipulation to thrive. This is exactly why people who resist control share this brilliantly simple habit. They just slow down when everyone else is frantically trying to speed them up. They know that truth survives patience, but lies absolutely demand urgency.
Okay. Part 3, defending your reality. Now we're transitioning from those external tactics to the internal breaches that happen when someone actively tries to mess with your perception.
So, have you ever been in an argument where you remembered exactly what happened? Like for an absolute fact you left your keys on the kitchen table, but somehow, by the end of it, you're the one apologizing for losing them? Yeah, that's gaslighting. It's a psychological tactic specifically designed to make you question your own memory, your perception, and honestly, eventually your own sanity.
And this doesn't just happen overnight. It's a very calculated progression. First, step 1, they attack your confidence. Then, step 2, they attack the facts. And finally, step 3, you actually start to borrow their version of reality. It is so dangerously effective because once you stop trusting your own inner compass, you kind of have no choice but to accept someone else's explanation. But someone who's impossible to manipulate fiercely protects their own perception above all else by asking themselves really hard, grounding questions.
This whole thing also preys on a huge vulnerability we all share: confirmation bias. Basically, our brain's natural tendency to seek out and favor evidence that supports what we already believe, or, what we desperately hope is true. Manipulators feed this dangerous cognitive bias by telling you exactly what you want to hear. But emotionally immune people do the exact opposite. They actively hunt for evidence that challenges their own beliefs. Why? Because they intimately understand that an uncomfortable truth is always safer than a comfortable illusion.
All right, let's look at part 4, closing emotional doors. To really protect ourselves, we have to look inward and figure out how our own past vulnerabilities are being exploited right now in the present.
The psychology here is pretty revealing. As adults, we very often end up chasing the approval we never got as kids. Our old emotional wounds basically become invisible backdoors for manipulation. Think about it. To someone who's hurting, a really strategic compliment feels like deep healing, right? And a minor criticism feels like total abandonment. Manipulators rarely create these wounds. They just sniff out where they already exist. So true projection isn't just about outsmarting the other person. It actually requires the emotional maturity to heal those hidden places so you can finally slam those invisible doors shut.
A really prime example of this is the fear of loneliness. When you're going through a tough season, literally any connection can feel incredibly valuable. And this is how we attract toxic relationships, because suddenly the fear of being alone heavily outweighs the fear of being used. Unmanipulable people, on the other hand, fully practice embracing solitude. They actually build a deeply peaceful relationship with being alone and use it as a sanctuary to let their identity grow stronger. Once you're genuinely confident in your solitude, it is simply impossible for a manipulator to bargain it away from you. Now for part 5, the strength of silence. Let's look at one of the absolute most powerful counterintuitive defenses you could possibly deploy against control. And that is silence. Just simple silence. When someone is fully expecting you to have a massive emotional explosion, flat out refusing to react creates this intense, almost unbearable discomfort for the manipulator. Let's break down exactly why that works so well. As humans, we naturally crave emotional resolution, and manipulators absolutely depend on your predictable reactions to gauge their level of control. By giving them literally zero reaction, you're creating massive uncertainty for them. Staying calm isn't a sign of weakness, and it doesn't mean you lack care. Calmness is intense psychological strength. It's not about stuffing your emotions down. It is entirely about you taking back the wheel and deliberately choosing exactly when and where your emotion deserves expression. Which brings us to part 6, knowing your story. As we wrap up this explainer, we really need to totally reframe what true strength and lasting protection actually look like in everyday life. So what does true strength actually look like? Well, it looks like this. Saying no calmly and totally without explaining yourself. Setting healthy boundaries is almost guaranteed to disappoint the people who benefited the most from your lack of them. But hear me clearly on this. Their disappointment is absolutely not proof that you're being selfish. It's actually just proof that your life is finally becoming your own. I want to ask you something. Looking back, say 10 years from now, are you going to remember the moments when people controlled you? Or are you going to remember the exact moment you finally recognize your own true value? Every single difficult conversation, every boundary you set, it all gets infinitely easier when your core identity no longer hinges on someone else's opinion of you. Because freedom, it always starts inside your own mind before it shows up anywhere else in your life.
I'm going to leave you with this one final, really powerful thought. Your ultimate defense against manipulation isn't spending all your time and energy trying to learn how to read other people. It's learning to read yourself so clearly and so deeply that absolutely nobody else gets to write your story. So whose pen is writing yours right now? Thank you so much for hanging out with me in this explainer today. I really hope these concepts gave you a solid new framework. Keep learning, keep fiercely protecting your peace, and I will catch you next time.